أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله آل الله واللعنة على أعدائهم أعداء الله من يومنا هذا إلى يوم لقاء الله أما بعد فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله من أصبح ولم يهتم بأمور المسلمين فليس بمسلم. First of all, I would like to welcome everybody for this session that is about the current issues, and I know that it's interest of everybody, and especially the youth, our young generation, to know about the current situation. And we as a Muslim are obliged to know about the current situation, especially current affairs of Islamic world. I'm honored to have a panel of great personalities, and on the right side of me is professor in the college in Indiana, and he is originally from Canada, and he has given speech. I hope that many of brothers and sisters, they have taken benefits of his speech. His name is John Andrew Morrow. He is convert, and Alhamdulillah, he follows the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Today we have him. He has research about the issue of takfiris, and his speech was very enlightening speech. Next to him we have Hujjatul Islam Hamza Sodagar, one of the speakers that was every year presenting his presentations, and who is a great scholar from Hawza Ilmiya Qawm, studying in the Hawza from almost last 20 years. He is hope of our youth and hope of the future in America, and especially as his skills in about the current issues, we want to have him in this panel. Next to him we have our one of the board of trustees, Hujjatul Islam Maulana Qaiser Abbas, who is residing at the moment in Sacramento. He is originally from Pakistan, and he was being involved in Muslim Congress from very beginning. He is founder member of the Muslim Congress, and he has a specialty about the current issues and current affairs. So we have a great panel, and when we like to speak about the current issues, one of the most important the issue that it's been on the surface, on the news, and the people, they would like to know about that is issue of Iraq. And then we can specifically say that Takfiris and their attack, and Daesh, their attack into Iraq and entering to the country in Iraq. What are the basis for that? What are the reasons for that? And at the moment, what is the situation? So we would like to know about that, and how we can contribute about those current affairs. What are our responsibilities at this time? These are the subjects that we would like to discuss. In the beginning, I would like to request our dear intellectual John Morrow to start with. I would like to request everybody, please welcome him with a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلي على النبي الكريم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. My presentation will have two parts. First, I'm going to discuss how I came into Islam, and then my experiences with the takfiris, and also, I'm going to wrap it up with linking it to the situation in Iraq. So I discovered Islam on my own. Alhamdulillah. Salawat. That was about 30 years ago. Then I met Muslims, okay? So, A'udhu Billah. Had I met Muslims like you, Alhamdulillah. For these muwahidun, or monotheists, as they call themselves, the pillars of Islam were three. I was taught the three pillars of Islam: haram, bid'ah, and takfir. Virtually everything was haram to these people. Television was haram, music was haram, prayer rugs were haram, prayer beads were haram. Killing the kuffar, however, was not only halal but wajib. Not only was the world composed primarily of prohibitions, anything that went beyond the scope of their myopic worldview was a prohibited innovation or bid'ah. In fact, one of the first things that I learned after taking my shahada when I was 16 years old was that only Sunnis were Muslims. Islamic authors were always keen to criticize Christianity for having so many denominations. They soon revealed, however, that Islam was nearly as divided as Christianity. It was pretty much raise your hand, say La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah, and by the way, Shias are kuffar. In fact, one of the first books I was given after embracing Islam was Talbis Iblis, translated by the Antichrist himself. If you didn't know his name, it is Bilal Phillips, an Afro-Canadian, Saudi-loving, lust-filled Uncle Tom who recruited African-American Muslims with military experience for the CIA, who then dispatched them to fight with Islamists and jihadists around the world. And he can sue me if he doesn't like it. Tellingly, one of the first lectures we converts were invited to was titled, The Groups That Went Astray. Now imagine, you're bringing people into Islam and the first thing you tell them is that everyone except us are all kuffar. Every imaginable school of jurisprudence, school of thought, or sects were denounced as falling outside the fold of Islam. All the various branches of Shiism were outside of Islam. All of the Sufis were outside the fold of Islam. Everyone except these so-called Sunnis, and wallahi, they weren't Sunnis, was an infidel. And if that is how tolerant they were of Muslims, you can only imagine the level of hatred that they had for non-Muslims. I knew one psychopath who openly fantasized about opening a slaughterhouse for kuffar. Okay, we're not in Syria, we're not in Pakistan, we're not in Iraq. These are people in Canada, okay? I met many more who idolized Hitler. You are a good brother, an Arab brother told me. So I'm sure you hate Jews just as much as I do. I do not hate Jews, I clarified, as this was tantamount to racism. I hate Zionist invaders, occupiers, and oppressors. I told him, there are Jewish converts to Islam. He said, I would never trust a Jewish convert to Islam. He said, they're evil. It runs in their blood. This demented lunatic started ranting about how much he would love to kill Jews. If you brought me a Jewish baby, I would kill it, he told me. I knew at that moment that the man in front of me was the very manifestation of evil. I remember sitting in a Tablighi Jamaat gathering in Brampton, Ontario, where devotees were piously reading from their sacred scripture, the Tablighi Nisab. These God-fearing nincompoops had reached the section concerning the consequences of missing an obligatory prayer. In the first hadith that was read, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, supposedly stated that anyone who misses an obligatory prayer, regardless of the reason, would burn in hell. They shook their heads in reverential fear, imploring that God would protect them from such a sin. The second hadith narrated that the Prophet and the companions overslept so much one morning that they were awoken by the sun shining on their heads. There was pin drop silence in the mosque, and then suddenly and simultaneously, all these tabligis broke out in loud cries and tears. They had come to the realization, a'udhu billah, that even the Prophet would have to burn in hell. Astaghfirullah. I shook my head, walked out of the room, and never returned again. On another occasion, destiny, in all of its didactic cruelty, brought me in contact with a Guyanese Indian family who lived in a cockroach-infested home in Downsview, Ontario. I remember sitting with this man and pointing out, "Brother, there is a cockroach crawling on your beard." And he said, "This little thing? That's nothing compared to the size of the insects in South America." Violating every rule of reason and sanitation, I was foolish enough to share a meal with this man and his filthy, infested family. In retrospect, the risks to my health were well worth it, as the story that I learned was priceless. Expounding upon the values of Tawheed, this monotheistic madman explained to me that any man-made image or shape of any creature amounted to shirk or polytheism. To my Western intellect, this made no sense at all. Polytheism was the worship of more than one God. Unless adored in the literal sense of the word, no object could in and of itself be inherently polytheistic. Even teddy bears are shirk, said this sage and insectophile. The jinn, he warned me, as he referenced some Saudi Wahhabi treatise on Tawheed, can possess stuffed animals. However, there is a solution, he said confidently to my great relief. Rip out their eyes at night. Otherwise, the jinn will possess them. I looked in terror at his children's eyeless teddy bears. In the morning, you can always plug them back in, he reassured me. As I tried to assess the level of permanent psychological damage that he had caused to his kids. Unlike other converts who fetishized foreign girls, I had received a cold shower at the new Muslim class put on once a month at a downtown mosque. Muslims must shave their armpits, said the imam. Okay, made sense to me. And then there was a Moroccan immigrant who was there, and he asked, well, what about women? Do women have to shave their legs? He says, no, we like our women natural. And I said, what about the eyebrows? You know, can women pluck their eyebrows? And he says, no, it is haram. At this point, things were getting scary for me. Hairy-legged women with unibrows. By the way, sisters, you all have beautiful eyebrows and you all smell like perfume and flowers. But these are the type of people that I was dealing with. The people I used to deal with competed with one another in their extremism. The French-Canadian convert, for example, insisted that the word in the hadith was not shave the armpits, but pluck them. Wallahi. I once went to visit him and found him with pious tears in his eyes, plucking one by one the hairs from his armpit. I met one brother who insisted that it was haram to trim one's beard. The Prophet said, grow your beard and trim your mustache. He pontificated with his ragged, crazed beard reaching down to his groin. He never said to trim the beard. Yes, I responded, but the companions used to grab their beard with their hands and they would trim the excess. He became furious. He says, that is the sunnah of the Sahabas, not the sunnah of Rasulullah. So he was implying that even the companions had failed to follow the example of the Prophet. So these people think they're even better than the Sahabas. Yes, we were taught some aqidah or beliefs. However, I soon realized that they were not teaching any of the traditional creeds of the Sunnis. They were teaching the Tawheed of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the founder of Wahhabism and the greatest innovator in the history of Islam. They claimed that they were teaching us true Islam and pure Islam, and that the Islam practiced by Muslims around the world is filled with falsehood and innovations. Consequently, we were not to follow schools of jurisprudence, okay? We're not taqlidi, we're not madhabi. Rather, we only had to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, namely the deviant interpretations of the Wahhabis. This, in reality, was also a form of following. while they objected to taqleed, they were doing the taqleed of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Rather than teach proper beliefs, etiquette, morals, ethics, prayer, spirituality, they focused on the most bizarre of things. The Prophet taught that farting pleases the devil. Following this prohibition could only have led to an intestinal explosion. I have feared praying behind Wahhabis ever since. At times I suspect that such gas is the source of many suicide bombings. The Wahhabis just go into a mosque and let loose. They also taught me that yawning pleases the devil. Fortunately, I was a first-year student in psychology, and I had learned that the only people who do not yawn are people who are mentally ill, as these brothers of mine most clearly were. I took a drive once with a Latin American Muslim convert, and my heart skipped a beat when he ran a red light. When he did it a second time, I knew it wasn't an accident. I said, "What the hell are you doing? You're going to get us killed." Fearing for my life, he said, "Only Allah has the right to make laws." I was once in a downtown mosque when a man ran through the masjid. He had attempted to run away from a taxi without paying and had sought refuge in what he thought was a church. Unfortunately for him, the church had actually been converted into a mosque and was filled with other Somali taxi drivers who proceeded to give the man a beat down on the grounds that he had entered the mosque without taking off his shoes. What image of Islam did these Muslims portray? This reminded me of the story, perhaps you're familiar with it. A man entered the masjid of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and urinated in the mosque. Okay? This is a well-known story. The companions of the Prophet got up, sword in hand, because they wanted to kill the man. He grabbed the arm of one of his companions and he said, "No." He says, "Go get a bucket. Okay? Fill it up with water, go clean it, tell that man to come talk to me." They did it, and they brought the man to the Prophet. They sat him down. He says, "With all due respect, this is a place of worship, okay? And we must keep it clean. So in the future, please do not urinate in the mosque." All right? So this was the method of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Am I okay for time? It's worth it if I go over time, because it's quite entertaining, right? You shouldn't just be terrified of the people. You should be afraid. You should be very afraid of them, okay? But you should also laugh at them. The mosques I used to attend were patrolled by Islamo-SS Salafi officers, always on the lookout for any haram, bid'ah, or shirk. I was walking in the mosque when I was surrounded by 3 Somali thugs saying, "Haram, haram, haram," pointing to a hole in my jeans. "Haram, you cannot show your knee." By his tone, it was clear that I had deeply offended him. God forbid the thought of my knee aroused him in some way. I lifted my leg, I pulled apart the hole, and I showed them that I was wearing long johns. It was Canada, and it was winter after all. They smiled, nodded their heads, and went on their merry way to harass and intimidate others. Fi sabilillah. That is their definition of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. Once I had the misfortune of being in the mosque when some mujahideen from Afghanistan, you know, those CIA agents who spawned Al-Qaeda, were visiting Toronto in order to collect funds for their fake jihad. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by 4 angry Afghans who pointed at my fuzzy, furry hat, saying, "Russian?" By the look in their evil eyes, they were ready to kill me on the spot and ask questions later. "Canadian," I affirmed. "This is a Canadian hat." By then, of course, I had long lost any romantic notion of the jihad in Afghanistan. I had learned from actual Afghans that these so-called mujahideen would rob, steal, extort, rape, and traffic in opium. Last time I checked, none of these actions were virtues. It's sad to say, but Soviet rule in Afghanistan was superior to mujahideen, Taliban, and US-occupied rule. Violence was not only being exported, it was being imported. There was an imam, and he was fired from his job as an imam, okay? And I was invited to this secret meeting in a basement, all right? And there was an Arab sheikh there, and he told the imam, just give me the names of the people who did this to you, and I will kill them for you. Now, the last time I checked, when ministers get fired, or rabbis don't have their contract renewed, Christians don't gather, and Jews don't gather in order to try to kill the administrators who fired them. But these were the type of people that I was dealing with. So, these jihadists tried to recruit me to go to Afghanistan. They recruited some of my friends. Some of them went, some returned, some did not return, okay? There was no limit to the madness I encountered. I knew one sister who left Islam and then returned to Islam, and asked her what had caused her to abandon the Muslim faith. She confided that the first thing that she was taught by an imam in California was that toilet paper was haram. Yes, toilet paper was haram and bid'ah. Okay? So, I have many more of these stories that I would love to share with you, but it gives you an insight into the mentality of these people and their extremism. I would just like to finish by reading a statement that I gave at the House of Lords in the United Kingdom. I was in Europe on a freedom of religion tour promoting this book, The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World. I bumped into Yusuf al-Khu'i, the grandson of Ayatollah al-Uzma Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khu'i, salawat. And he invited me to testify at the House of Lords about the ISIS crisis. So this is the statement that I read. I am here to express my solidarity with the people of Iraq. The Muslim world suffers from a crisis of leadership. The traditional religious and political infrastructure was dismantled by Western colonialists and imperialists, as well as internal decay. A void was created, and that void has been filled by those who offer the loudest voice and the biggest bank accounts. This situation in Syria and Iraq is the product of poor foreign policy. Western powers have a history of sometimes supporting terrorists abroad, and then they expect us to contain them domestically. Who created ISIS? Who supported ISIS? Who funded, armed, trained, and advised ISIS? You cannot mobilize 100,000 foreign-backed fighters and mercenaries in Syria and Iraq without the complicity of the surrounding countries and without the support of regional powers. History is our greatest teacher. Experience should inform our decisions. Present decisions impact our future. Supporting the Mujahideen in the way we did gave us Al-Qaeda. Supporting the Syrian rebels the way that we have gave us Al-Nusra and Daesh, the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. In their attempt to remove little devils, they replaced them with greater devils. It's sad to say, but Libya had more stability under Gaddafi. It's sad to say, but Egypt had more order under Mubarak. It's sad to say, but Syria was more stable under Assad. What can we do? What can be done? Number one, pressure Western powers to stop supporting groups, directly or indirectly, that persecute Christians, Shiite Sunnis, and anyone else who opposes them. Two, help put a halt to religious colonialism. Take steps to prevent outside interference in our religious affairs in the West. Stop the spread of takfiri, jihadi preachers and propaganda. Three, support the dissemination of traditional Islam. And by traditional civilizational Islam, I include Sunnis, Shias, and Sufis. Help reconnect Muslims to their spiritual tradition, the Quran, the Sunnah, the true Sharia, and most critically, the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the world. The covenants of the Prophet provide an authentic model for Muslims to follow with real implications. They can't solve the ISIS crisis. They can, however, help undermine the theological and political foundation of so-called Islamic extremism. They can also help galvanize Muslims around foundational primary sources which came straight from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon them. The real army of Islam is not ISIS. The real army of Islam are those who oppose them while abiding by the Islamic rules governing combat. Who speaks for Islam? It certainly isn't ISIS and other terrorists who slaughter unarmed men, women, and children, who crucify Christians and cannibalize corpses. Who speaks for Islam? The Prophet speaks for Islam. Salawat. And those who terrorize Muslims and Christians have broken the covenants of the Prophet, made a mockery of Islam, and merit the malediction of Allah. I beg your forgiveness if I went over time.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Morrow, for your presentation. It was great, informative. We need to have time, but because of the shortage of time, he tried to go brief and very fast. I hope that brothers have taken benefits of his presence. One of the very interesting point that he said that Salafis, they don't have anything in their account other than shirk and haram. So everything is either shirk or haram. So they have become haram or shirk. Now I would like to request Hujjatul Islam, Maulana Hamza Sodagar, to speak about the current situation and current affair in Iraq and its.
Thank you for that very enlightening and entertaining talk, which covered a lot of very important issues. I would like to begin by mentioning and emphasizing the importance that is increasing day by day of us as believers, Muslimin, followers of the Holy Prophet, followers of the Ahlul Bayt, to look into matters not simply of religious value as we traditionally understand it, not simply to look at salat and sawm and hajj and be satisfied with paying our khums, with going to hajj, with fasting the month of Ramadan and being happy about it. It is important to note that the affairs that we are dealing with in the world, globally, as believers, whether it's in America, which there are many issues that we're dealing with, or it is in North America, or it is in the Western Hemisphere, or it is what the Muslims are facing globally, we should see ourselves as one ummah that needs to look at its progress and needs to look at what is going on and what is happening and make sure we have a correct understanding of the circumstances. There was a time, and some people still might be in that deep sleep, thinking that if there are matters that are affecting believers in the Middle East, in Palestine, in Syria, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Bahrain, in Yemen, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Azerbaijan, in other regions, in Burma, if it's dealing with them and those believers there, then we can feel the comfort of our homes here and not feel that it's an obligation or necessary for us to learn about what is exactly happening. We were saying it back then. Others, great ulama, were telling us back then that this is not acceptable. We have got to be on top of things. We have got to be having a proper and correct understanding of what is actually happening. It is our religious obligation to have that understanding. Otherwise, we are going to be making serious mistakes religiously because of simply being naive and ununderstanding or having a misunderstanding of the circumstances and easily playing into the game that the enemies of Islam want. There was something funny, I won't mention any names, during this whole problem that is a continued problem in the Middle East. The problem that Palestine is occupied, and of course, inshallah, by the grace of God, from the river to the sea, it will be freed, inshallah, in the near future. With this problem arising, and there being a need for all Muslimin, all human beings, showing their solidarity with what's going on, there were people that had the audacity to say nothing about that whatsoever, but rather to put up signs that, oh, Baqi has been destroyed many years ago, and let's go protest against the Saudi regime and the Saudi embassy in DC. Forget about the 20,000 plus people that are present protesting against what's going on in Palestine. Let's forget that and go on a Tuesday and protest what happened in Baqi. Is that what Amir al-Mu'mineen wants from you? Is that really your understanding of what is going on in the world? If Amir al-Mu'mineen, if the lady Fatima al-Zahra, if Imam al-Mujtaba, Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq were around, they would tell you to go to Washington, D.C. in front of the Saudi embassy and protest that Baqi's graves have been destroyed and say nothing about the Palestinian issue? I'm sorry, I don't know where you got your information from. It is extremely important to have a correct understanding of what is happening in the world, and it does affect us as believers here in the United States of America. And if we do not have that proper understanding of things, we will make very, very serious mistakes that are going to be costing us our religion, even, if that's the only thing that we can understand. Because religion doesn't mean, and the reason why I use that word in that way is because to many of us, unfortunately, religion has taken a meaning very different than what deen in Islam means, which is the reason why some of the speakers have decided to say, look, Islam is not a religion, it is a deen. Okay, which I disagree with that. I think our understanding of religion needs to change in the English language. That is the word we use. So it is important that we have a correct understanding of what is happening in the world. If we don't have a correct understanding, we will be making serious mistakes. Without our knowledge, we will be helping the enemies of Islam destroy Islam, and we will be doing that qurbatan ila Allah. Unfortunately. One scholar who was involved in the circumstances in Iraq years ago, a few years ago, not too many years ago, told me, and I will not mention his name, he said, I know this with facts, that there are a good number of Iraqis spying for the CIA, qurbatan ila Allah. This is not putting down the Iraqi people, okay? Don't get me wrong. What we're saying is an example of how we believers, don't say they believers, we believers, this is an example of one group of believers. They really thought that they're doing a good job, but helping the enemies of Islam. We need to have a correct understanding, and we need to develop that. Each and every one of us has got to do that. With regards to the situation in Iraq, we have got to make sure we develop a correct understanding. One of the things that I've heard recently with this combination of what started earlier on with Daesh in Iraq, and of course previously in Syria, and the combination of what is happening in the occupied lands is that some people are saying, oh, why are we supporting the believers, or if they even refer to them as believers in the occupied lands, while we know some of the people that are in Daesh inside Iraq are Palestinian. So why in the world do we want to support Palestinians? I'm scratching my head and thinking, how in the world are you seeing the picture that you're even asking that question? How are you seeing that picture? What is the cause of Daesh? I think in multiple instances in the talk that my brother here gave before myself, there's reference that the CIA is the creation, or the CIA are the people that are the creators and supporters and funders of these groups. The same CIA that helps the Israelis is behind what is going on in Iraq. We have got to have a correct understanding of how things are happening. I would like to say this because I thought I have a lot more time, but apparently I only have a few minutes. Sometimes you lose track of time when you're talking. No, you're okay, though. That was very good. What I would like to say about the situation in Iraq, specifically and particularly, is that we have an Iraqi people, we have a foreign occupier, we have this new group that has come about called Daesh. If we only look at Iraq itself, I think I can summarize the different groups that are involved in these three, putting the Saddamis and the Ba'this with Daesh, which is itself important for us to understand. That the Ba'thist army, whoever remained of them in Iraq, is siding with, helping with what Daesh is doing. They're siding with Daesh. It is important for us to understand each of those components, each of those elements, each of those players, each of those factors and factions in this equation, the way they actually are, who they truly are. Who is Daesh? What are they doing? The first part of the presentation that my brother here gave before me was about this fanatic, this illogical structure of belief and accompanied with some practices or decrees which makes no sense to anyone that has any sense in them. Not just from a Western perspective, anyone that has any sense in them should not see this as making any sense. Where did all of this come about? It is important for us to see that this is deviation. This is not the school of thought that the Holy Prophet has taught, that the Ahlul Bayt have taught. Anyone that wants to teach true Islam, this is not it. It's important to understand it. That's correct. But is it only that we need to understand? Is it that we need to get upset that these are people that are calling the sajdaka, turba, muhr, whatever you like to call it, they call that shirk. They call us kuffar. Is it only enough and sufficient for us to understand that? Or is it important for us to see who the hands that are supporting them continuously, even their ideology, who they are, and why they're doing what they're doing? We heard, as I said in the talk, and I don't want to repeat that, where the source of this is, and I really would like everybody to understand that. Many times I feel that it is not truly understood. The source of this is kufr, the kufr that the Quran condemns, not the kufr that is mentioned in the words of these people, these fanatics. Okay? Because what they mean by kufr is including all of you all, and anyone who's simply not Muslim. What we mean by kufr, according to the Quranic word, is people that are fighting Islam, fighting the Muslimin, fighting humanity and the progress of Islam, which is something, a guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is supposed to guide all people towards prosperity. Those kuffar, they are the source of it. Why are they doing this at this point? This is also something that I feel is important. Well, first thing that needs to be mentioned is that it didn't start today. It didn't start today. Read your history. Realize when this started happening. When the Western imperialists came into the Muslim world and they started creating deviant groups, not only amongst Sunnis with the creation of the Wahhabis, but also amongst the Shi'i as well, with the Baha'i movement. When did all of this start? It started when the imperialist powers came towards the Muslim world and they realized that in order to rule over these people, they have got to change the ideology of these people and make them, for the sake of God, do things that the imperial powers wanted them to. That's when all of this started. The creation of these different ideologies began. When did this start to intensify and become worse and worse? When the movement of the Muslim world started to pick up and started to progress in a direction that the Western imperial powers started to feel that what they have thought they had in that region, they're losing it. When is that? with the success of the Islamic Revolution in the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is when they started to feel that there's an actual pushback and the Muslimin are moving towards them and against them. You can see how that happened. These Salafi Wahhabis killed a number of Shia in Hajj, during the Hajj season, by the order of their masters. In the sacred land of Mecca, which even animals have security. It's called Masjidul Haram. It is the Haram. You cannot kill animals even there. With the progress of this movement, what we're seeing, relating it very quickly because I'm told that the time is over, the progress of the Islamic movement, this is not an Iranian movement, this is an Islamic movement that ties everybody who is Muslim together. The progress of the Islamic movement is such that against the will of those who came and occupied Iraq in order to rule that country more than before and have more control over its resources, and by the way also have a closer tap on the Islamic Republic of Iran, against their will, the Iraqi people, by the guidance of the Marja'iyya, may Allah bless them, Ayatollah Sistani particularly for the guidance that he has provided, they were able to establish a government that represents the Iraqi people as opposed to the interests of the Americans. They were able to do this. And they tried in many different ways. If you read that history, they tried in many different ways to make sure such a government doesn't come up in Iraq. But by the grace of God, the leadership of the Marja'iyya and the following of the people of Iraq, they were able to establish this type of government. And in every election, again, as we see that example in the Islamic Republic of Iran, we see this example in Lebanon, we see the example in Palestine, that they tried to use the democratic system to get the wrong people in power. They've tried that in Iraq too many times. By the grace of God and by the support of the Iraqi people and the guidance of the Marja'iyya, they have been able to bring in people that despite all the deficiencies that all of those, especially the Iraqis that are facing it firsthand, know of the deficiencies that exist, despite all of that, are a people, are politicians that for the most part and overall are supporting the Iraqi people's interests, not the Americans. And the Americans don't like that. Okay. And so destabilizing Iraq is something that is very important. So Daesh from Syria has to come in. All the talks about separating Kurdistan is happening as well. And you see the Israeli Prime Minister before this whole Gaza situation is supporting the Kurdish separation and having talks about that. Destabilizing Iraq is something that they're trying to do by the grace of God. And we should make a lot of prayer for the believers there. They're in very tough circumstances. They are intentionally being pressured in this way so that the people, one of the things that is a serious objective is for the people of Iraq to stop giving their support to the government that they have set up in Iraq. And that'll be very important for the imperial powers of the world. It's a very difficult test for the Iraqi people, especially the Shia in Iraq. We pray and we hope, have our hopes very high, that with the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides, the guidance that the Marja'iyya gives in Iraq, the guidance that the leadership in the Islamic Republic gives, and all of these are part of one system, not two systems. We hope and we have our hopes high that inshallah they will succeed, and this savagery that we're seeing in Iraq is going to come to a stop with the success of the believers in the Islamic movement in that part of the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their success. I apologize for taking too long. Sayyid salawat.
Brothers and sisters, I would like to thank Hujjat Islam Sodagar for his comprehensive presentation about the issue in Iraq and some of the root causes for that. we would like to see the issues not only particular, when you see issues in Iraq, then in Pakistan, then in Afghanistan, then you'll not be able to conclude, and then you'll not be able to make right decision. But it's important that you need to see global and make no global vision as the world is becoming as a global village. We had our dear scholar who flew all the way from the United Kingdom, Maulana Sayyid Najmul Hassan, who is a resident alim in Burnley, UK. But at the time we are run over the time. I wanted to open for the QA session, but I feel that our scholars and presenters, they did not leave any room that you have any question, because they gave complete information. Is there any question in anybody's mind now? I don't think so. So one person is raising the hand. So we can have maybe a couple of questions, maybe one or two. So we are already running the time. Yes, brother.
Hello?
Okay, we have 5 minutes. Alhamdulillah, we have been allowed to have 5 minutes more.
Assalamu alaikum. So as a Muslim in these days with access to YouTube, we read a lot about the riwayat of the reappearance of the Imam and what's going to happen, and all these characters like the Sufyani and the Khurasani and the Yamani, and what's going to happen in Syria. I hear from some of the ulama that, don't read too much into that, that it's what you have to do. Don't look into the riwayat and focus your energy over there. But that confuses me, because when I see these riwayat, I try to understand them and see them practically at what's going on. And if I see something that matches or something that I feel might be, corresponding, and then I hear at the same time that's not what you need to be focusing on. You need to be focused on what you need to be doing.
I hope it's not a speech, it's a question.
Yeah, so my understanding is, what is the purpose and what is our duty regarding those riwayat in the contemporary day?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a good question, and I don't know if you're referring to myself, because that sounded very similar to something that I have said, and I don't know what community you're coming from, by the way, either. But let me clarify that. We have riwayat, we have ahadith about some of the signs of the return that we call the reappearance of the Imam. I would like to call it the return of the Imam to the public arena, where we all know of his presence more openly. We have signs that's mentioned, they are mentioned in the riwayat and the ahadith. We also have riwayat and ahadith that discuss some of the circumstances or some of the events that will be unfolding towards the end of times, whether it is the coming of the Imam itself, whether it is things that happen before it, or it is things that happen after the coming of the Imam of our time. The concept, for example, that you all have heard, or at least some of you, raj'ah, the return of some of the Imams, some of the good people, some of the bad people. We have some of those things mentioned in the riwayat, in the ahadith. We have some of the things that will be taking place, like you mentioned, things about Syria and what have you. How are we supposed to look at these riwayat? And how are we supposed to translate them into today's context? And what the brother quoted, that we need to, some say that we need to focus on what we need to do instead of focusing on these riwayat. There's nothing wrong with focusing on the riwayat and trying to have an understanding of it. However, who is going to have the ability to understand those riwayat? One of the things that I will warn against is a superficial understanding of the riwayat, or understanding the riwayat and stressing that something that the riwayat is mentioning is specifically what is happening right now in Syria or in Iran. This guy is the Yamani, the other guy is the Khurasani, and his army is like this. This guy is supposed to have his right hand, something wrong with it, and we see that here, and so on and so forth. Okay. Making those judgments is very difficult, and at times it can be very wrong. There is a reason why the ulama that we have, the great scholars, are not focusing on them. Not that they don't read it, but they don't focus on those ahadith and constantly talk about them and see or try to explain to us that what that means in today, and is this that or not. There's a reason for it. I would like to highlight this point that there's ulama that are very pious and very knowledgeable. They know all of these riwayat inside out. Okay, all of them. They have studied them very well. Why isn't it such that we see them focusing on these? Rather, we see YouTube clips being produced trying to interpret what these riwayat are and say, oh, the Dajjal is this or the other. Why? Didn't the Imam of our time say, in the absence, go to ruwata hadithana, go to the ulama? There's a reason for that. Interpreting those riwayat in a fashion that you could clearly say that this riwayah means this individual or this incident is very extremely difficult. It is the lay person or the lay people who have not studied the riwayat enough to be acquainted with the language of riwayat enough that easily take a riwayah, not even a riwayah in Arabic, take away a translation of a riwayah and say, oh, this means this. Just because of certain similarities. The danger of focusing on the riwayat, not reading the riwayat. You can go ahead, anyone can read the riwayat and try to have an understanding. But if your focus becomes that, because of the nature of such riwayat that are talking about something in the future in a language that was spoken 1400 years ago approximately, or 1200 years ago, it's difficult to have a clear interpretation of it. If that becomes our focus, that means something else that takes priority, and we do have a clear understanding of it, is going to go on the back burner, and we're going to lose focus of that. And what is that? What our responsibility is. We have clear indications as to what our responsibilities are. Okay? We need to find those responsibilities, open our eyes, read the news, and see how those clear instructions found in the ahadith, in the verses of the Holy Quran, translate to today's time, and try to figure that out. On this side, if you like to spend some time studying those riwayat and looking at whatever clip is produced in YouTube or in other outlets, you can go ahead and see that. Don't lose focus of this. That's what's being warned against. The ulama are saying, don't lose focus of the clarity. The verse of the Holy Quran says that the Holy Quran has muhkamat and it has mutashabihat. Take the muhkamat and interpret the mutashabihat based on the muhkamat. Clear verses of the Holy Quran. There are some verses of the Holy Quran that are not as clear. Riwayat are similar. We have hadith on this. You have muhkamat, you have mutashabihat. The riwayat of the coming of the Imam, of the signs of the coming, and so on, are some of the ones that can be referred to as mutashabihat. We have muhkamat. We have clear messages coming from the Quran, from hadith, about our obligations. If we focus on the mutashabihat and lose track of and lose focus of the muhkamat, we will be in serious danger. And this is why the ulama are not focusing on these. They are focusing on the muhkamat. Follow these instructions. Take a glance at these as well while you're following the muhkamat of the religion.
So I hope that this was last question.
Oh, we have a question from the sister side.
So to be fair, we can have one from sister side as well. Please.
Assalamu alaikum, thank you.
Assalam.
I just wanted to know, like, I was having a conversation with someone and they were saying that, so what do we do regarding Iraq? Like, can we protest? Because protesting, like, you know, if you protest, like, what kind of message do you send? Because it could be misconstrued as intervention, which is not okay. So then what do you suggest we do? And a lot of people aren't even informed. You know, that the US is behind this, for example.
Yes, brothers and sisters, there were a few things that were being suggested by our scholars, and one of them is being aware of the situation, being informed. and understanding the situation and raising the awareness. That is the very first responsibility of every individual, because if we are not aware of that, and if our community is not aware of that, then they're going to make wrong decisions. When we have awareness, then it's important that we need to stand against the oppressors of the time, and standing with the oppressed people, also practicing the religious duties as much as it's possible at this time. Not only protest is all the time a solution, but being more committed towards Islam, because the main focus of the imperialists at this time is Islam and its values. And when Islam has taken place, as Shaykh Hamza has mentioned, that when Islamic revolution has become successful, that was the reason that all these puppets and all these pockets started working on that, and we have seen these political wings that have been forming. So if that is the reason, then when we know the root cause and when we know the reason, it's important that we need to be working for establishing the Islamic society in the world. And we have to establish Islamic societies wherever we are based on Islamic knowledge. I think there are a few questions that are being sent through the written questions, but I don't know that time is not there at the moment. We already have run out of time. What I would suggest, brothers and sisters, that we have scholars next 2 days until Sunday. Please take benefits of their time. Whenever you meet, you can ask them those questions. But if Brother Hamza would like... Okay. So, brothers are saying it's your choice. You like to have food of thought or have the food? Food of thought? Okay, so we are going to skip the dinner and lunch at the moment.
Okay, there's one good question here. I mean, all the questions I'm sure that people have are good. The question I have here is, how do we understand the recent air attacks done on ISIS by the U.S. government when the ISIS is their own creation? That's a good question, and I would like to use this to say, this is why we're saying you have to study things and look deeply so you have a correct understanding. I'll give you a historic account to have us maybe understand this a bit. And I will use that also, that's another point. One of the ways you can understand what's going on today and have your mind open enough to understand what is happening is to look at history and understand and analyze what happened in history. Okay. One of the things that we have during the earlier periods, the first 40 years after the hijrah of the Holy Prophet, is a revolt of the people, a rebellion of the people, the Muslims, against the third Khalifa, Uthman. I'll try to make this very brief in this session. You all know, or many of you at least know the story, that Uthman was actually assassinated in the end, against the will of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen was against killing the third Khalifa. This is very clear. After the killing of Uthman, Muawiyah started claiming that, oh, Ali, you supported the killers, you've got to hand over the killers, and the wars, the battles that Muawiyah, the excuse that he had to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen and not to give Syria to Amir al-Mu'mineen and to allow him to appoint the ruler that he wants, was the pretext that Amir al-Mu'mineen, or according to him, Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayh, was or had supported the killers of Uthman, and he's not bringing them into justice. So that's what you see on the surface, and it seems like, there seems to be some form of justification for that. Why isn't Amir al-Mu'mineen bringing these people to justice if he really thought that this wasn't the right thing to do? Which is a very good question to ask. What I want to say is this: the third Khalifa, Uthman, he had sent letters. Uthman is from Bani Umayyah, and Muawiyah was from Bani Umayyah. And there was a very, very, very good relationship between the two. All right? But it's interesting to note that Muawiyah was fully informed of what was happening in Medina, and it was pretty clear that the people who were rebelling against Uthman were going to assassinate Uthman. and he sought help. Uthman sent letters asking help from Muawiyah. Muawiyah had troops. If he could bring 75,000 people to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen, he could have brought 20,000, 10,000 to Medina before the killing of Uthman and protected Uthman. Who ended up protecting Uthman? Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Muawiyah could have, he didn't. Why? He intentionally didn't support Uthman. He's his family member, yes, but power is dirty. Okay? Power is dirty. Muawiyah wanted that power. If, in order to have the power that you want, if you have to kill your own people, you'll do that. And how many times have we seen that happen in history? And this is your own people. We're talking about your own president. We're in Dallas, Texas. John F. Kennedy was killed. I don't think this is not something that you need to read too much about. It's pretty clear who was behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy right here in Dallas, Texas. When they have to kill their own kind even, they will do that. Don't take my word for it, and I'm not making a judgment on that, but go read and study for yourself whatever judgment you come up with. But one of the ideas that's there is that the Twin Tower bombings, or the planes going to the Twin Towers, was an inside job. Okay, whether you like to accept that or not, the possibility of it is definitely there. If in 20, 30 years you get that information, don't be surprised. If our own people, God forbid, this is wording it the way the kuffar have, if we need to kill our own people to have the power that we want, so be it. Power is dirty. Okay. So if these are ISIS, these are Muslims, these are Arabs, these are Afghans, these are Pakistanis, these are whatever, they're not even our own people, create them, then kill them all. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. What allows you to kill your own kind is definitely going to allow you to kill other people that you dehumanize as well. And you portray them as terrorists. They do the job, then when you have to, yeah, these are terrorists, kill them all. They're fine. That's fine. There's no worry about that, and no sadness, nothing that follows. Okay? So yes, definitely, ISIS, read the history of it, and the creation, the type of people, the satellite channels that are promoting it, the way they're able to promote this type of ideology here easily and comfortably and go back and forth and have the support of the imperialist powers. And when you want to give the right message, you're not going to have that freedom to do so, as they do. This all shows you and sends you signals. They are the creation of the imperialists, trying to make use of what they call the Arab Spring, which we call the Islamic movement, the Islamic awakening. And they created, this is one of the groups that they created, plenty more that were mentioned, some of the others were mentioned, Al-Nusra and others. And yes, when they want to come in and use that as a justification to kill, I'll tell you one last story, and this is something for you to do research. This is something that I'm not claiming this, I'm just quoting this from a source that was mentioning this. Intelligence in the Islamic Republic of Iran was explaining this. And I heard the recording. I don't know who the guy really is. I really don't know that. Just on the record, I have no connection there. Okay, I was just hearing a recording of this. They were saying, I don't know if you've heard of the hostage crisis. Okay, I think everybody here should have heard of the hostage crisis between the Islamic Republic after the revolution and the United States of America. This man was saying that they have gathered enough or plenty of intelligence that the move that was done there to go in to the American embassy was actually something that was ordered by the Americans themselves, in order to give them a justification to bring in the military and take Iran back from the revolutionaries. They needed a justification for that. And they have done that elsewhere. This brother was saying, this is not I'm not making this claim. I haven't seen the intelligence on that. They're saying it's very clear. They ordered that, and they have the names. I will not mention the names that they mentioned and how these people were connected to those agencies. And they were the ones that pushed these students to go and do it. Yes, of course, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. In the end, Imam Khomeini took that and gave it a direction that changed the course of history, but the people who actually carried it out were doing so based on other intentions. The ISIS is definitely the creation of the imperial powers against the true Islamic movement. And yes, when they need to go in, they call them terrorists. When they need to go in and bomb them, they will do so. And look at the last point. Look at the justifications that are being given, and read that for yourself. What's really important, the first priority aren't the people that have been killed in the thousands, but it's American interest. Okay, it's very interesting to see that. Thousands of people getting killed, it's not important. American interests. Okay. American citizens, not human beings, American citizens. The ones that they want, of course. So they'll do that. I'm sorry to take too much time.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate everybody, your presence over here. I hope that you enjoyed today's presentations. I would like to thank everybody, all the panels, although we could not take benefits of that. Yes, we would like to read Dua Faraj all together and then leave, inshallah. You can take benefits of food as well. So let us stand up and recite Dua Faraj. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات.